He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're getting into a mysterious case of vanishing islands. Start us off with one particular mystery that one of my family members had mentioned to me on my recent vacation to Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Before we get to all of that, a couple of plugs. You can find us on your social media channels, and should you wish to reach us directly, you can do so via cryptidclues@gmail.com. Now, the past little bit has been slightly chaotic. We've been recording many of our episodes a few weeks in advance due to my fluctuating schedule, so this one I feel like I've been out of the chair for a while, and so this one feels very special to be back in it and getting into this topic that is a little bit close to home. But I digress. This topic, as I said, is in connection with my latest travel back to Vancouver Island, visiting family back there and just getting into what I've been doing on the podcast and talking a little bit about different mysteries on Vancouver Island, which I've done a few topics on the show about some of those mysteries. This is another one that completely caught me off guard when my family member told me about a time they had lived near Nadeau's Bay, it's a small harbor that can be seen as you head up north on Vancouver Island towards Landsville. Now, I spent a lot of time growing up near here. And I remember those summer days at low tide when we would head out in our rubber boots and buckets and just collect oysters for a couple hours, bring them home and just dig in. Oh, those are good times. Shells aside, though, all these years later, I have learned of a mystery in this bay that may or may not be known to most, but was witnessed by several members of my family. And we're going to break this down. Now, I'm quoting my family member here and what they had told me. And I quote, "From what we knew, an island had appeared for one day that was gone the next. My father knew the area very, very well, and in October, during a family fall gathering, my aunt was looking out towards Vancouver, across Nadeau's Bay, and said aloud, 'What am I looking at?' My father grabs the binoculars and says, 'What the?' No people or anything specific, but a massive silhouette of an island with trees had appeared. It did not move, nor was it a stationary shadow, and it was there all day, even past sundown. Then the next day it was gone. Everyone had seen it, the whole family, but they didn't think to move up the road to view the island better, nor take a photo. They were just shocked that, whoa, it's just still sitting there. Now, this was at the mouth of Nadeau's Bay and wasn't the Winchelsea Islands." End quote. Now, the Winchelsea Islands sit a fair bit of ways from the mouth of Nadeau's Bay, but Maud Island is visible by the naked eye, and it's a decent size, regardless of where you are looking out from Nadeau's harbor. But we know that this mysterious island is neither of those possibilities. So if you're in the bay and you're looking out, you'll see Maud Island. It's right there. Then in behind, you'll be able to see the Winchelsea Islands as well. But Maud is definitely like the prominent one right in the dead center that you'll spot. But this is interesting. How do we explain this? And I'm going to narrow down this into two scenarios, and then I'll point out a couple key components that might be overlooked. The first will be scientific, albeit not the solution. It's a possibility nonetheless. Superior mirages. This is due to an atmospheric inversion, which is where warm air is sitting on a top layer of cooler air, causing the light to bend downward. Now, this occurrence isn't a rare phenomenon, but it seems to happen quite commonly, especially in British Columbia. So this scientific situation can make distant objects essentially appear taller or higher than they actually are, or even cause objects to appear to float in the air. Now, in the case of Nanoose Bay, this exact scenario happened. Scientists were quick to respond to an atmospheric inversion that showed a mountain range near Chilliwack actually visible in Nanoose Bay. There's a woman by the name of Simone Engels who was out getting photos of the area, and when she looked out towards the Strait of Georgia, she saw what she interpreted to be an iceberg. Now, this was on a colder winter day back on January 9th of 2022, and I quote, "I zoomed in on it, and I could not believe what I was seeing, because it looked like there was a huge iceberg floating by," end quote. Thinking that this was just impossible and not real, after a full hour and a half passed, Engels remained, and apparently the iceberg did too. But when she finally left, she posted the photograph to social media, and everyone that responded they were blown away. They were baffled, convinced that this was an iceberg. Now, she had a friend who coincidentally studied iceberg geomorphology for her own PhD. This friend came forward and said, "Yep, that's the real deal. That's an iceberg." But in reality, this was actually an exceptionally clear optical illusion. What was thought to be an iceberg was really the peaks of the Cheam Range near Chilliwack, which is more than 180 kilometers or 111 miles away. Now, normally, these mountains would be visible, well, on the other end of the horizon, hidden away from view here due to the Earth's curvature and invisible to someone in Nanoose Bay. But due to the bending of light in the atmosphere, voila. I'm going to have a photo posted right here on the video version for you to see. You'll note that the main island in the middle is the Mode Island, and then you'll see the Winchelseas around there too. Now, if you look to the right side of the mountain top, is Mount Baker in Washington State. It's huge. I mean, it looks like it could be another iceberg itself, but that's another mountain, and that's not any type of optical illusion. That's that. It's there. That little iceberg-looking thing on the left-hand side, that is our optical illusion. So, this explains the scientific approach. Now let's steer into the mysterious unknown side of things now and see how much science meshes into this. Ghost islands, ghost ships, much more have been a core component to sailors back in the day. Of course, mysteriously appearing islands can be attributed to volcanic activity, tides rising and falling, but this one specific island has been playing a game of hide and seek with scientists for over 150 years. Now, many photos have been taken of this island, but it still just remains a mystery. Now, this island is located on top of the Kamani Bank mud volcano, which lies underwater off the coast of Azerbaijan. Now, Azerbaijan is a transcontinental and landlocked country at the boundary of West Asia and Eastern Europe. So, out in the Caspian Sea, when the specific volcano erupts, it breaks through the waves and forms land roughly 20 kilometers off from the mainland. Having first been documented in May of 1861, that following year, it vanished. Officially on record, in the 20th century, the island appeared and vanished at least 6 times. Now, the landmass rarely remains for more than 2 years. Within about a year, it'll disappear back under the water. So scientists have become increasingly confident that the island's appearance was directly related to the volcano and its eruptions. The huge jet streams of fire and mud were so powerful that they could be mistaken from a distance for explosions from oil platforms. However, and most recently, in 2023, the Mystery Island caught scientists by complete surprise and actually appeared without any volcanic eruptions or noise. I've included a photo here that shows a 2-year span via satellite imaging of the island rising and descending. So, this occurrence also repeated itself a few times before. In 1993, the island was spotted via satellite imaging without any prior volcanic eruptions. So we have something that scientifically can be explained, but only partially. While not devoid of having 100% a scientific explanation, I think it's something that is easily overlooked. There's a lot of seismic activity that sometimes we just don't see, but it's there. Now, like we mentioned prior, humans have been seeing things on the ocean for as long as we've been traversing them. And they have done a fairly great job at mapping many of these things along their travels. Many of these discoveries, however, like the aforementioned Mud Island volcano situation, also have disappeared from the oceans without a trace. Phantom Islands is the official term passed on to these lands. Now, before I get a little bit too far into these Phantom Islands, I just wanted to circle back to the case of seeing maybe a mirage and then what my family had possibly seen in the Neuse Bay. When you look at the mirage, could possibly have been that they saw something that was just light bending and presenting a piece of land here to the naked eye that really wasn't there. But I have to counter it with, okay, they could see trees and detail on this island. The island did not move, which neither did this supposed iceberg. But the other thing as well is it was there for the entirety of the day. But I have to give some credit to it being maybe an illusion, because January and October, they do share cold drops in temperature, especially on Vancouver Island. So ultimately, it's hard to kind of discern what it really could be, and a part of me wants to believe that maybe it was something beyond this world, but I have to look at it with a certain scope of playing devil's advocate. And when you look at the evidence here of regards to how the science can explain it, there is some credibility there that maybe it was something. Maybe it was something from Washington State. Maybe it was something from the mainland of Vancouver, and it just projected this to your naked eye. But that's where we get into the realm of the Phantom Islands now, to see if we can mesh, as I said, science and, dare I say, mythology? I don't know if myth is the right word to describe this. Mystery. I digress. Hy Brasil, one of, if not the most famous Phantom Island ever known. Located off the west coast of Ireland, and unlike its unrelated namesake of Brazil, Hy Brasil was reported being a tiny, mist-covered rock isolated in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the island was first described and mapped in 1325, but subsequent mapping efforts didn't seem to be able to agree on the island's exact location, reportedly only appearing once every 7 years. Some who have claimed to come across the island report sailing towards the rock before being shrouded in mist and sailing right through, without ever reaching land. One account, this will take us back a few centuries. Scottish sea captain John Nesbitt was traveling from France to Ireland, during which he apparently not only spotted the island, but became stranded there with his crew. And reportedly, the island contained a castle, and while being mostly uninhabited, was home to an ancient grave gentleman who told them of the island's ancient history. Now, this promoted a series of expeditions to find Hy Brasil. That happened in, around the late 15th century, the last of which was manned by Italian navigator and explorer John Cabot, who arrived in North America in 1497 without spotting the island. By 1865, maps were being produced without the island anymore, with its last reported sighting occurring in around 1872. These sightings aside, and looking past Nisbet's claims, this island is still speculated as being nothing more than a fairy tale. Now, since the 1st century, Antillia Island, also known as the Island of Seven Cities, was described in various locations in the Atlantic Ocean. But its initial mapping in 1424 placed it west of Portugal and Spain, and just west of Azores Archipelago. Then, in 1474, a map by Paolo Toscanelli, who was an Italian mathematician, astronomer, and cosmographer, featured the island in Azores adjacent location. Now, because of this, it actually prompted Christopher Columbus to plan a stopover there during his west route to India. While Columbus successfully made it to the Azores Islands, he didn't find Antilia anywhere in the entire region, thus ultimately continuing on with his journey. One of the other pieces of evidence was a letter from King Afonso of Portugal, dated 1475, which said, and I quote, "The 7 cities and any other populated islands," end quote. It's very, very short, and I just wanted to highlight that specific sentence there, but it does conclude with, I'm paraphrasing, that these lands were to be granted to a knight by the name of Fernio Tellus. So, as the North Atlantic became a much more popular sailing route post-1492, the island began disappearing from newer maps, and the mysterious Antilia started to become more associated with Central and North America, with its official last appearance in 1631. Look, there's no shortage of mysterious disappearing islands. So, yeah, to close out this chapter at least, we're going to look towards Beimeja. It's a tiny island off the coast of Mexico that first appeared in maps back in 1539. It was described as being no more than 80 square kilometers or 31 square miles, with a blondish red soil to it. Now, while this island itself was featured heavily in maps between the 16th and 17th centuries, it began to appear less frequently after the 18th century, with its last map appearance being in the Geographic Atlas of the Mexican Republic in 1921. Now, things get a bit murky here. With no confirmed sightings since the 16th century, you would assume, like any other, that this island went the way of the other aforementioned Phantom Islands. But due to its proximity to the Mexico coast, it has actually caused a lot of political stirrings as recently as 2009. In a 1997 debate over international water territories in the Gulf of Mexico, both the United States and Mexico plan to divide the Hoyos de Dona stretch of international waters where Beimeja was thought to be located. Now, if this island really does exist in that location, it would actually extend Mexico's maritime limits and give the country rights to the oil deposits in that area. So naturally, you can see the interest involved here. If Mexico could establish this island's existence, well, it would bolster the country significantly. But unfortunately, even after an extensive search, efforts to locate the island failed and motions advanced forward based on the non-existence of Beimeja Island. Until 2009, when efforts to resume and locate the island when oil exploration in the area was put on delay. Ultimately, and politically aside, this led to a wild conspiracy where the United States was accused of actually destroying the island, thus causing Mexico its rights and over 22.5 billion barrels of oil. So you can see how that alone is quite a rabbit hole, and thus a conversation for another day. In closing, though, for this episode, it looks like most, if not all of these islands will they ever be found again? Or at least scientifically explained? Unless it's a mirage of sorts, as we discussed before. That appearance of an island that my family spotted. I already said it was during a colder time, and while it was visible for the entire day, well, scientifically, it could just be that, a mirage. But depending on beliefs, and I'm going to avoid the prophetic perspective here, things do seem to be taking a shift in our time. And I've heard many a person say we're in a mental shift right now, or awareness and energy, and of course, to each his own. But what do I think? I think things have happened throughout our history that have been recorded, and while some of it is true, other instances are false, but these things are recorded nonetheless. We have the power and technology now to cross-reference and determine what, in all likelihood, is potentially real. And that's one of the biggest things that puts a smile on my face when it comes to cryptids and Bigfoot in particular. I imagine some of that same scientific explanations for these mirage islands is the causation for ghost ships like those old tales of the Flying Dutchman and other flying-like boats that terrified sailors centuries ago. But while many don't like it, that science that helps to explain many but not all of these scenarios hopefully can be the same science that helps us learn the ultimate truth about cryptids and other mysteries. Of course, time will tell. And until that time, I am your host, Taylor. We'll be back next week with another mystery. As a little preview, I found a whole bunch of leads on a few different ghostly hauntings that I want to filter through and discuss with you all. So stay tuned to the feeds, and remember, you can find us via CryptidClues@gmail.com. Take care and stay safe.